Okay, I've started the recording, and so we'll call the meeting to order. And I want to thank Alon Ben-Meir, who is joining us to talk about Saudi Arabia. And before I do that, I want to just remind people of what's coming up because we have a bunch of extra stuff. We have an extra Zoom added in 2 weeks. Mazan Kumasia. On how does the current state of the Middle East affect the world. Mazan is the head of the Natural History Museum in Bethlehem. 2 weeks later, a month from now, we have Shira Klein, who's a professor at Chapman University, who's an expert on Italian Jews, talking about fascism in the 20s in Italy and maybe as it's reflected in the 2020s in Israel. A month later, we're having an open discussion, and these last two will be hosted by Yossi. And then in November, we have Ian Lustig, who was an early proponent of the one-state reality, and he's just edited a series of papers exploring the implications of the one-state reality, and that's what he will talk about. So let's come back to where we are here, and we have Alon Ben-Meir, and he's a retired professor of international relations at NYU. He was in the Global Affairs, the Center for Global Affairs. He's a senior fellow, or was at the World Policy Institute. He is retired now. He's an American expert in the Middle East politics and affairs, specializing in peace negotiations and conflict resolution between Israel, Arab states, and Turkey. For the past 25 years, he's been directly involved in various Track 2 negotiations. He's a staunch advocate of the Arab Peace Initiative, which brings us to Saudi Arabia. He writes a weekly analysis column that's syndicated. He's been a guest on many, many TV shows. He's authored 7 books from 1975 to 2009, and I gather he's working on 2 new ones. He was born, as we've been discussing, in Baghdad, and he got his education in Oxford. There's a lot of talk about a possible Saudi-Israel-U.S. deal, and one of the things people talk about is they say that it will change the map of the Middle East. Jim Zogby today said it can't change. The map of the Middle East has already been changed. And he says Saudi Arabia and the UAE are playing transnational roles in the region as well as with global powers. They no longer allow their policies to be dictated by the U.S. They remain deepening ties with China, and they remain neutral on the Ukraine. And they've reopened diplomatic ties with Iran. In pursuit of their ambitions, economic development, and social goals, both Gulf states, and we're going to concentrate on Saudi Arabia today, are seeking regional stability and calm. This is how they are working to change the map of the Middle East. And he goes on, and this is maybe we'll come to, Israel and the U.S. apparently want to turn back the clock on this changing Middle East with the goal of offsetting China's role by swinging Saudi Arabia back into an exclusive U.S. orbit and creating a united front to challenge Iran. That ship has sailed. To explain this in greater detail, we have Alon Ben-Meir. It's your floor, Alon.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. I'm very grateful for your invitation, and I hope I can do some justice to your introduction. When people often mention I've been involved, which I was, in back channel in the search for conflict resolution, I must tell you that I cannot claim any major success in resolving any of the major conflicts in the Middle East yet, but I keep trying. The the development with Saudi Arabia in recent years are extremely important and relevant, of course, to Israel itself, to the Middle East in general, and to some extent even to Saudi's influence on a global scale. It is almost hard to imagine, actually, what the Saudis have been able to accomplish in the last 10 years in particular, and especially, I should say, since Crown Prince Salman Mohammed bin MBS, known as MBS, assumed that became the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia. Let me touch first on what has been developing in the last few years and culminating with the current negotiation between the United States and Saudi Arabia, as of course, and Israel, in connection with the prospect or the possibility of normalization or normalizing relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, and its implication both regionally as well as internationally. When you said, this will certainly change the very nature, the very of the Middle East, it probably isn't even that is an understatement. That is, normalizing relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia will have major significant implications throughout the region. For Israel itself, of course, this will be nothing short of a revolution. That is, for Israel, this will open the door to potentially normalizing relations with the rest of the Arab world and with the majority of the Muslim world. I remember there are 54 countries, Muslim-dominated countries in the world, 54. And with 6 or 7 only made so far peace with Israel or normalized relation with Israel. So you can imagine the magnitude if 30 or 40 more would follow suit. What would Israel's situation or position would be in terms of its ability to project itself technologically, economically, militarily, and otherwise throughout this vast region with nearly 1,300,000,000 Muslims in those 44 countries. Not to mention, of course, the Shiite, which roughly represent about 180 million Shiite in the world today. The question here, however, is that what the Saudis are asking, and rightfully so, and I've been supportive of that position for years and years now. And mind you, I've had scores and scores of conversations with top Saudi officials over the years, as recently as a few days ago. I personally, when they asked me, what do you think? How should this be evolved, developed, processed? And my position is I'm saying, if you do not insist that any normalization of relationship between you and Israel should also resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that is not only that's going to be counterproductive, but that means basically the region will remain destabilized. Israel will remain an occupying power. For that, a brutal occupying power. And that is not a recipe for stability, not a recipe for long-time peace, not a recipe for peaceful coexistence. And so this must be part and parcel of any new arrangement between Israel and Saudi Arabia. And mind you, for the last several years, almost 10 years now, more than 10 years, Israel and Saudi Arabia have been cooperating on many, many levels. The exchange of intelligence. Israel provides very advanced technology to Saudi Arabia. In fact, the Saudis are buying various kind of weapon system from Israel. So there's a great deal of collaboration, cooperation behind the scene. But their common enemy, as you well know, is Iran. That is, Saudis will always tell me, Alon, I want you to know, we trust the Jews 10 times better than we trust the Shiite. And I believe that. Even though now we hear about the resumption of diplomatic relationship between Iran and Saudi Arabia, we should not be mistaken by thinking that they are going to have normal relations for years to come. That may not happen. For the Saudis, they prefer, first and foremost, to have normal relation with Israel, because on Israel they can depend. Israel is a significant military power. Israel is probably the front line that offer frontline deterrence against Iran. And notwithstanding what kind of relationship Saudi Arabia may eventually have with Iran, they still want to have solid security collaboration between Saudi Arabia and Israel. But again, the price is, and that's how it should be, is resolving along these lines the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I want to mention, Jeff mentioned earlier, when the Arab Peace Initiative being introduced in 2002, 21 years ago, I hailed that initiative because, as a matter of fact, when you read it, you can see Saudi Arabia, even then, 2002, de facto recognized Israel conditional upon ending the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in terms of returning much of the territories back to the Palestinian and recognizing the Palestinian Palestinian state. The Saudis did not change that position at all since then. But however, they made certain, gesture by allowing, nodding, giving the okay to Bahrain, to United Arab Emirates, to Morocco to some extent, to go ahead and normalize relationship with the state of Israel. They basically, in talking to some of their leaders, they tell me, we know Israel is a fact of life that cannot be changed. We know that Israel receive and have the support of the greatest, the biggest, most powerful country in the world, which is the United States. We know that these things will not change. We accept that. And we might as well, if we cannot defeat Israel, we might as well join Israel and stay, remain alliance with the United States. And what this is to bring me to what the Saudis now want from the United States, which in fact, they could have obtained it. For example, they want a civilian nuclear reactor. If the United States does not provide them with one, they could easily obtain that from Russia or China. Both these countries would be more than happy to provide that for the Saudis, but the Saudis prefer to have that kind of relationship with the United States rather than China or Russia, albeit China is the largest importer of Saudi oil by far than any other country. And as you well know, the Chinese mediated the resumption of diplomatic relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So the Chinese would like to strengthen their foothold in the Middle East. The Saudis know that. The United States know that. Nevertheless, for the Saudis who have had very long relationship with the United States in terms of security, collaboration going back many, many decades, they know that they can rely on the United States, but they want something in return. So one of their demands, as I said earlier, is allowing them to develop, provide them with a nuclear reactor for civilian purposes, mostly, for energy, medical use, etc. The second requirement they have is that the United States should provide them with security guarantees. That is along the line of the United States commitment to any of NATO member state. That is, if Saudi Arabia is to be attacked by any country in the region, that the United States will be required to come to its aid. That's the second requirement. And the third requirement, they want to have acquire from the United States the most advanced weapon system, including the latest combat airplane, specifically the F-45 and others. Now, in talking to various members in the administration, specifically some of the congressional leaders, I'm getting to, and I understand now, that all the three of these requirements can be managed. Obviously, they'll be modified. They'll be modified to some extent. But I think they'll be modified to a point where it still will be palatable, still be acceptable to the Saudis. The biggest problem, however, that the Biden administration is facing is not as much as trying to deal with these three demands that the Saudis want, but how to convince Netanyahu and his extremist and I call it openly and clearly racist government, to do the kind of concession necessary in order to lead to the resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And that is really where we are at this point. I don't know, Jeff, if you had an opportunity to read my very last article from a few days ago. The title was, Will Netanyahu be able to rise to the historic occasion? That's an unparalleled historic occasion to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia. So, as you well know, this particular government, with the likes of Ben-Gvir and Smoritz and others, Levin and others, the likelihood that this government will make the kind of concession necessary in order to establish a path for a Palestinian state, it seems to me almost impossible. Basically, it's impossible. That is, the nature, the makeup of this government will not allow that to happen. So basically, Netanyahu has choices to make. He can either give up on the normalization of relations with Saudi Arabia, which in my view would be one of the catastrophic things that can happen. Not necessarily Israel is going to be attacked or destroyed by any enemy per se or anything like that, but this will be an historic opportunity of mammoth magnitude that will be lost to Israel. And then you can understand the repercussion of what that means. So the question here for him, will he be able to rise to this historic occasion? And as I said earlier, it seems to me with this current government, he cannot do so, because he has also other problems. That is, if he were to dissolve this government, he still has, of course, as you well know, he's indicted on 3 different kind of charges, and he's terrified that if he's not the prime minister, he will end up basically in jail. But that is, in my view, was almost, I want to put it on the side for a moment, because when you compare that to the potential of normalization of relations with Saudi Arabia, and what would that do for Israel, compared to his 3 indictments, to me, that, of course, that would seem minuscule, but of course for him, it's a major thing. Obviously, a man of his stature, of his accomplishment, does not want to end up his life in jail. That's obvious, it is a given. But I have been suggesting many times to many Israelis who are listening, in this government, outside the government, that if Netanyahu were to dissolve this government and form a new one, and I can tell you, Ben Gantz is open, Lapid is open from Yesh Atid and others, provided they don't want him to be the prime minister. That is, they will serve in a unity government as long as he is the prime minister. He could be the foreign minister if he wants to do that. So there are some talks behind the scene of such possibilities. The question is whether Netanyahu, who was committed to a great extent to this current government, and he's so bent on so-called reforming the judiciary and moving Israel in a direction that it is ominous as far as we are concerned, will he in fact be enticed enough to change his position, normalize relation with Saudi Arabia, improve America's relation with Israel, which is at all-time low, mind you, as well as with the EU, and make that a massive leap forward. And I was saying to people who listen around him, imagine if he were to do that, and he asked for forgiveness. I think the whole country, in my view, all of Israel, will forgive him if he were to take this kind of major step that is going to change the nature, the future of Israel as we know it. So this is obviously a tall order. I cannot tell you today if he's going to do A or B or C. He's not giving any sign of what his next moves are going to be. But it is, the possibility is there, and the final chapter, so to speak, has not been written. I know I can continue with this unless you want me to stop, take your questions. It's up to you, Jeff, because I think we've been speaking about 20 minutes. I cannot hear you.
Okay, we can go to questions, or you could continue a little bit longer. It's up to you if you have something you planned.
Well, let me just add a number of things. Because I did not want to speak initially about the mishaps of what the Saudis have been doing, and which is very interesting to your listener, is that Saudi Arabia has never been conquered by any power, historically speaking. This is the one country that has never been conquered by any power. This was established in 1933, and ever since, the kingdom Abdul Aziz was the first, the king of Saudi Arabia. The Saudis obviously have not been, the human rights record has been dismal at best. And they have been, trying to work on that and rectifying that in recent years. The restriction, as you well know, over what women can and cannot do was extremely, extremely very restricted. They could not, for example, drive. They could not go anywhere without a male companion, all of that. And MBS has been changing that very slowly, but certainly today that the Saudi society has in many ways transformed to a point where it was impossible, really hard to believe only 5-6 years ago. So that is a change that's taken place in Saudi Arabia. That is not to suggest that Saudi Arabia is a democracy, but Saudi Arabia has been a stable nation, a stable country. There was no revolutionary movement within Saudi Arabia. There was some quarrels within the royal family in terms of who could succeed the king. The king often changed who is the crown prince going to be, but the stability that Saudi Arabia was able to project is extremely important. The other mishap that I'd like to mention to you is the war in Yemen. I think the Saudi Arabia has done and continued to make a terrible mistake in not ending this war. And before there is now ceasefire, hopefully the ceasefire will continue. Hopefully that the resumption of diplomatic relations between Saudi Arabia may bring to a point where the two sides can just sit down and agree to end the war once and for all, because the tragedy that's been inflicted on the Yemenite people, it is beyond anyone's belief. We're talking about more than 20 million Yemenites living with food insecurity. We're talking about more than 1 million children. Tens of thousands of them go to sleep with absolutely no food. I mean, it's a tragedy of such magnitude that we have not seen since World War II. Saudis have played a role in that, and they need to wake up and put an end to this atrocity that's been continue to take place in Yemen. So the Saudis, on the one hand, have at this point are in a state where they can make a huge difference, massive difference in the Middle East. And if normalization of relation with Israel in fact take place, imagine if the war in Yemen is going to come to an end, and the entire region, when you say the map of the Middle East will change, it will in fact, the borders may not change much, but the condition in the Middle East will have changed in a very, very dramatic way. The implication on that, I just want to mention on Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas will be very, very significant. If there's going to be peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia, which will have to create a path for a Palestinian state, this is going to force Hamas to rethink its militant posture toward Israel. This is going to pull the rug from underneath Iran. This is going to weaken Hezbollah, because Hezbollah and Iran, Hamas, are fighting Israel, are against Israel, want to destroy Israel, because the Palestinian problem, the Palestinians have been looming so high. But if there is going to be a solution for a ending of the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians in the West Bank, that is going to have tremendous impact, as I said, both on Hezbollah, certainly Iran, and Hamas. So again, we can talk about so many different other implications, but suffice to say, this is an historic moment for the Middle East. And I really hope, the Biden administration, President Biden himself, will put his foot down, put the kind of pressure necessary on Netanyahu, because it's going to be absolutely necessary for the Biden administration to put a great deal more pressure on Netanyahu in order to change his position. So we'll have to see if that's going to happen. Biden needs a win. He needs a win before the election for him to be able to forge normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia will be a significant win for Biden. So I don't think he's going to spare any effort in that regard to try to change the dynamics and reach to that point. I'll stop here and take some questions.
Okay, thank you. And I want to give the floor right away to David Mandel, who just gave us a chat that he's got to leave, but he's got a good question. So David, can you do your question now?
I can. I probably won't even be able to stay to hear the answer or other people's responses. Sorry, I have a rehearsal at 7. But I'm just, well, I mean, you can read what I wrote in the chat, but it's, you know, this celebration about peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel is just kind of makes me wonder, because they've never been at war. And it certainly has not contributed toward any progress on Israel recognizing or improving the situation of Palestinians, which some people said, well, it would do that. It clearly hasn't. So my comment is, I'll just read it quickly. I can accept the necessity of seeking détente with Saudi Arabia or any other authoritarian right-wing dictatorships to cooperate on fighting climate change, agree on nuclear non-proliferation, etc. But the normalization agreements are based mainly on sales of military goods that increase danger in the region and surveillance equipment that enhances internal repression. No thanks to an alliance of reactionary regimes. Yes to seeking connections with democratic and working class forces in Saudi society and anywhere else.
Well,
so,
what's your point? I mean, everybody in the world is dictatorship.
Yeah, my point is, why are we cheering an alliance between dictators that are suppressing people under their control? I'm sorry, but I really have to go right now, so I won't be able to hear the answer. Maybe one of you can talk to me later.
Yeah, I could not disagree with you more. We have been dealing with dictators for generations and generations. We're dealing with so many dictators nowadays. And that is not necessarily the reason why we should or should not have any kind of relationship with these. Today Saudi Arabia occupies an extremely important position in the Middle East. It may not have fought directly Israel, but it is still part and parcel of the Arab world, and it has a significant power that it can project because of its location, because of its position as the leader of the Sunni Islam, representing more than 1,300,000,000 Muslims, because of its strategic location. Saudi Arabia is extremely important. To suggest that only because it's a kingdom and a dictatorship, we should not be dealing with it, then we might as well stop dealing with 80% of the countries around the world. Other than Europe, and even in the United States, we are now having a shaky democracy, given what Trump has been trying to do, and he might still want to do. So you can't rule, you cannot say dictatorship, I cannot. The question is, what kind of relation you want to have with them, and to what extent they are able to work with you in order to advance peace in the region. And I can say categorically, working closely with Saudi Arabia, regardless of the nature of its regime, it can advance peace and stability throughout the Middle East. It will strengthen Israel to a great extent beyond anyone's imagination. It will end the horrifying occupation, that it is ruthless, unacceptable, completely inconsistent with Jewish values. Just imagine we, the Jews, have been persecuted throughout the centuries. Now we've been victimized. Now we have become the victimizer. To me, this is totally unacceptable. And if there's such an opportunity that Saudi is going to presenting to us that make peace and end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, this is nothing short of a revolution, a complete transformation of the state of where Israel it is, where it's going to be. So to suggest because they want to buy more weapons, they want to have a nuclear reactor, all of that, we should not be dealing with them. This is counterproductive. It's going to merely make things worse for the Middle East rather than improve, move it to the better.
Okay, wow, thank you. Let's go to the, I'll have a comment on that later, but let's go to the questions. The order of the questioning will be Gideon, Yossi, Dick, and then myself. Other people who want to raise your hand by going to the reactions on the bottom of the screen. So Gideon, it's your show.
Thank you, Alon. Very interesting. So in 2002, when Saudi announced on their peace initiative, I couldn't be more excited, I could have signed it right away. It would be very, very happy. But nothing happened. The Israeli just completely ignored it, no reaction, nothing happened. So what do you think changed today that Israel will accept it? I mean,
oh, I didn't say that. I hope I was clear. I don't expect this Netanyahu government will accept take an even modest step toward resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This government is simply incapable, and if Netanyahu may take any unilateral step on his own, the government will collapse. So he knows that. And if I were him, notwithstanding my illegal problems,
yes,
I would, for the sake of the country, I would dissolve this government, form a new one, face the law if necessary. But imagine what would they do for the country. But you need
the Nobel Prize right away. Yes,
you need a hero. You need someone who's willing to sacrifice himself politically. He's not going to be executed for the sake of the country.
Yeah.
And this is the problem is, since the Arab Peace Initiative been introduced, most of the Israeli government have been, by and large, from the right of center. Likud has been dominant throughout the last 15, 16 years, with the exception of 1 year. Even then, with Bennett Lapid, government was also
right wing.
Right wing, and it says, because as a matter of fact, they could not agree how to deal with the Palestinians. So you know what they decided to do? We will not deal with the Palestinians, as if it was just a side little issue to be left alone. So what the Saudis are doing now, giving Israel one amazing opportunity, and they are not demanding from Israel anything that they have not asked before. In fact, much less. They want a path. Show us how this conflict, because if the conflict continues, imagine what's going to happen. Under what circumstances can anyone tell me will the Palestinian ever accept subordination and occupation to the end of time?
Yes.
What Palestinian will ever accept?
Everybody knows this. Yeah.
Well, what Palestinian will ever give up their right to statehood? Who's going to compel them to do so? No one can. No one will. So the Israelis must come finally to their senses that this is something that they cannot change. The Palestinian right of statehood is enshrined in the United Nations Resolution 194 of 1947. The fact that they have refused to establish a state then, when they were able to, does not mean that they have lost that right. They didn't want to establish it then. they did not lose that right. If they want to exercise it now, they should be able to exercise now, but not for the sake of the Palestinian only. For me, it's for the sake of the Israelis. Just imagine, 4 generations of Israelis youth are now grown to be warriors rather than peacemakers.
Yeah.
I go to Israel often, ask 10 years old, 12 years old Israeli boy, what does he or she think of the Palestinians? The first thing they tell you, oh, they are terrorists.
Yes.
I hate them. If you ask a Palestinian boy in that age, what do you think of the Israelis? They will tell you, is a soldier. Is a soldier with a gun to want to kill me. They want to kill us all. They want to destroy us all. This is the perception. Now, if these generation, 10, 12, 15 years old, think already in those terms, what hope do we have? What can the future is going to be any better for both Israelis and the Palestinians?
Well,
So the occupation is destroying the Israeli character.
Yeah, it's well known. Yes.
That is why I'm concerned. Not just for the sake of the Palestinian, but for this Israel's own sake. This occupation has to come to an end.
Yeah, I think so. I'll just say just one comment. I myself don't see how Palestinians will give up of the right of return, but I let other people ask questions.
I want to tell you something. Honestly, I've been involved in this very discussion with the Palestinian many, many times. And I can tell you, even Arafat at Camp David in 2000 understood there would be no right of return. What he wanted in the document to suggest that the Palestinians have the right of return, but not that again to be returning. They know that simply is not going to happen. The solution is resettlement and or compensation. That's a solution. I advance a major peace proposal. I would like any of you who would like to read it. It's in the World Affairs Journal. It is the establishment of Israeli-Palestinian Jordanian Confederation, where the need of all three will be fully met if they were to, I don't want to, I can't, it's too extensive of a document. Anyone who would like to read it, it's a World Affairs Journal.
Can you send the link? Can you send us a link, Jeff? If
I will send it to
love
Jeff. I will send it to Jeff.
Yeah, if you send it to me, I will put it in the email where I have the links to the recording.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you, Alon.
And please send it pretty quick afterwards, because
I will send it tomorrow, first thing in the morning.
Okay.
First thing in the morning.
So Yossi?
Thank you, Alon, for the interesting talk. But I have really, after the agreement, what they call Abraham Accord between Israel, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, and is Kuwait was part of it? I don't remember.
No, not Kuwait, no.
Okay, so it was Bahrain and United Arab Emirates.
And Morocco and Sudan.
Yeah, but mostly Bahrain and United Arab
Correct.
the main countries. And de facto, these two countries threw the Palestinians under the bus. It was not important for them what would happen to the Palestinians. And the behavior of the Israeli government in the occupied territories and the silence from these two governments, really silent, it shows that they have their own interests, their own selfish interest, economic, military, alliance with the United States. They see Israel as one of their friends. So my question is, or let me put this way, today Israeli politics so infected by what I call messianic ideology,
True.
that it's impossible that any Israeli government will accept a Palestinian state. It's not going to happen by themselves.
Not this government, that's for sure.
Even previous government. I was in Israeli parliament in 2022 when it was Bennett-Lapid government, and we had a meeting with the Speaker of the House. I belong to an organization called Abraham Initiative. I don't know if you heard about. Doesn't
Yes.
matter. We had a meeting, and he told us straightforward. He said, a two states will not going to happen with this government, because this government have the element of Bennett, which is part of the Messianic ideology. And the compromise was there will not be annexations and there will not be a Palestinian state. This is how they decided. And they are considered to be more moderate government, quote unquote.
Well, not, yeah, not really. Bennett, that government was not moderate in any way.
Right.
But I want to just mention to you something, if I may. Lapid, while he was still caretaker prime minister, was very clear that if he were to form a government, he will work toward the establishment of a Palestinian state. Lapid. Within the government, Lapid-Bennett government, they agreed in advance that they will not even discuss the Palestinian problem.
Right.
So that government was completely out of the question. You are absolutely right to even talk about Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But if Yesh Atid, Gantz, will be able to form a government, they are open, they publicly have stated time and again that they will sit down to discuss the establishment of a Palestinian state. That is what we know. But
they don't have, I'm sorry, they don't have a majority.
Well, right now they don't. Right now they don't.
They also said very clear they will not sit with a Hadash Ta'al party in the government in order to form a majority. So they will prefer, Gantz, half of Gantz's party today is a defectors of Bennett, and they will do everything to ensure there will not be a Palestinian state in Gantz's party. But anyway, I want to go back to Saudi Arabia. And I got the impression that possible that Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia worry about Saudi Arabia, their interest, economic interest, military interest, and influence. And I have a concern that the Saudi Arabia eventually will go in a direction of Bahrain and United Arab Emirates. In other words, what is more important for them? To do this alignment and normalize relationship with Israel, or to have a Palestinian state? You cannot have both of this. The only power in the world that forced Israel out of the occupied territories will be the United States government. And they're not ready yet for this. No other power in the world will force Israel to do it. So I want your reaction to this, but I have a very concern that Saudi Arabia eventually will go in the same directions of Bahrain and United Arab Emirates. I hope I'm mistaken, but this is what I do see, because they cannot have both. Palestinian state and normalizing relationship with Israel. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, your point is well taken. I just want to emphasize the difference, huge difference between Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and United Arab Emirates. Saudi Arabia, now the de facto leader of the Arab world. Usually Egypt still is the largest country, largest Arab state. But even Egypt today depends on financial support coming from Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia is the de facto leader of the Arab states. That's number one. Number two, being the leader and being the representative of the Sunni Islam, based on my conversation with them, they are not in a position to abandon the Palestinian to their own devices. I am not suggesting that because they care about the Palestinian, but because from there, how they see it, abandoning the Palestinian when they are in fact the de facto leader of the Arab world, this will be the biggest slap in their own face. But there's another factor which is extremely important. If the Palestinian is to lose hope, complete hope, that no Arab state is going to be any more supportive of them, they will have nothing left to lose, which means if Saudi Arabia is seeking stability in the region and try to quell the Iranian as well, The only way they can do so is by making sure that the Palestinian gets some kind of satisfaction. Again, not for the love of the Palestinian, because of their love for themselves. Exactly what you said. For them, stability is critically important to advance their own causes, their own interest. And as long as the Palestinian can agitate, can provoke, and will continue to do so if they feel that they have nothing left to lose. Not only Saudi Arabia will suffer, certainly Israel will suffer. I do not rule out the possibility there will be second, third, fourth intifada, the likes of which we have never seen. Because when you go to the West Bank and you talk to the Palestinian and you see the depression that they are in, when you see the suffering they are going through, when you see the despondency and the despair, you understand this is a time bomb. It just is going to explode, and one for one another. Saudis know that, and they are now, that is why they are very careful in saying, we cannot advance normalization unless we solve this problem, because this is a tinderbox, and it's going to explode in our faces in one form or another. That's the reason, not for the love of the Palestinian, because of their own interests dictate that stability is critical for them, and stability cannot be attained and sustained unless there is a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Yossi, what happened to Yossi? Oh, Yossi, okay. Dick, it's up. You got the floor.
Alon, I'm glad to finally meet you since we both write for City Watch. I've seen you. We had a couple emails, but I had these.
What do you do with City Watch?
Yeah, I write a regular weekly column.
Oh, you read it? Okay, yeah.
I write for City Watch every week.
Oh, you do too? Okay. Yeah, they publish me regularly.
Yeah. I see three things happening in the background, and I would like your reaction of it. One is, I've read that there already are connections between Israel and Saudi Arabia without diplomatic relations, and that's mostly intelligence agents communicating and working together. I don't know what issues, but I'm sure it deals with, I don't know, it couldn't be very good, but I'm sure that's what they're working on. So there is something already happening. The other thing is, the U.S. is putting pressure on Saudi Arabia to join the Abraham Initiative. And I think they're doing it with sticks. I mean, with carrots, you know, we'll provide.
Sorry, it's Abraham Accord. The initiative is the
Okay, Abraham Accord, correction. Yeah. Okay, I mean, the U.S. is putting pressure on Saudi Arabia to have diplomatic relations with Israel through carrots like providing weapons, providing nuclear technology. But as far as I know, there's no corresponding pressure on Israel to make concessions that will please the Saudis. So that's the second factor. And hold on, I made a list of all the Arab states or Arab political entities that have diplomatic relations with Israel. There would be Jordan, Egypt, the PLO, Sudan, Morocco, Bahrain, and the UAE. Maybe I missed a few. So all of these states have accepted the fact that there will not be a Palestinian state. So why would Israel assume that they have to make concessions to form a connection that they already have in a de facto way with Saudi Arabia? I mean, why can't they just live with the status quo?
Well, it's going. I'll answer your last question first. Yes, there are many Israelis who feel that the situation is sustainable, that they can sustain it the way it is. There's a de facto occupation. There are two sets of laws, one for the Palestinian, one for the Israelis, even those, of course, living in the settlement. And they feel that this can be sustained indefinitely. But the normalization of relation with Saudi Arabia transcend by far even the peace with Egypt. And of course, Egypt was a critically a major departure as far as the Israeli-Arab conflict is concerned. But for Israel, normalization of relations with Saudi Arabia, if you ask Netanyahu today what would be the biggest prize he would want to have, he will tell you peace, normalized relation with Saudi Arabia, because that will open the door to additional 40 Muslim states, not just Arab states, Muslim states that will be able to normalize the relation with Israel. That's one reason. But the Saudis also understand the value of what Israel can offer, not only in terms of deterrence against Iran, but the exchange of technology. I mean, Israel has been selling advanced technologies to Saudi Arabia, certain arms, certainly intelligence, sharing of intelligence, going back now for more than 10 years. So both understand the value of the bilateral relations, and they also understand how much more valuable it would be if this collaboration is to further be extended. The third point he mentioned, putting pressure on Saudi Arabia to join the Abraham Accord. Well, the Saudis don't need any pressure. They're saying we are ready to join, but these are our conditions. We want civilian nuclear reactors, we want advanced weapons, and we need security guarantees. These are what they want. And the fourth condition is for Israel to accommodate, to find a solution, a path that will end the Israeli occupation. So there is a pressure on them to do something, but they're also saying, yeah, we are ready, but these are our preconditions. If you meet these conditions, we are more than happy to join because everybody knows, this is not an open secret, that Israel and Saudi Arabia have been collaborating for some time, many, many years, as a matter of fact. But it is not the same as you formally normalize relation that opened the door for the rest of the 54 different Arab and Muslim countries that will be able to establish relation with Israel. This can revolutionize Israel's future in terms of economic development, name it, in every which way you can possibly imagine. But more than anything else, I want to tell you, as a Jew, to me, for the Jewish people to be an occupying power and ruthless as such, to me, that is totally, completely unacceptable. Because, we people ask, there's a rise of anti-Semitism. Can anyone tell me here today that the way that Israel is treating the Palestinian is not causing a rise of anti-Semitism around the globe? Only a fool will not admit that. And that's going to be further intensified and intensified. Every single day, 1 or 2 Palestinians are killed. To this day, from the beginning of this year, 158 Palestinians were killed, most of them under the age of 25. This is not acceptable. This is not acceptable. For a minister like Ben-Meir and Moritz who say we should burn these villages, we should wipe them out of the face of the earth. Is this, we Jews ought to be wiping out villages with men, women, and children, burn them all to death? I mean, how is it conceivable? How is it conceivable that Israelis are able even to live with this horrifying reality? To me, this is it's a calamity, not on the Palestinian. It's a Jewish calamity to be in this state of affairs.
I completely agree. I mean, I'm not, there's a bunch of Israelis on this call. I'm not one. But the reason I'm active in this field is exactly what you said. This is just what goes on in Israel in my name is completely unacceptable. But I want to go to the other side of the question, and that is Saudi Arabia is asking for security guarantees and a nuclear reactor. And the nuclear reactor, the words are for peace, but really, once you get a nuclear reactor, you're enriching uranium, and down the line, it opens the door, even if not at the moment, to a bomb. And so those two things, even if the Saudi demands are modified and lessened, they're still going to be very, very difficult, if not absolutely impossible, to get through the U.S. Congress. And I'm not talking about the it's going to be Democratic opposition that will stop those things. What do you say to that?
Well, I've had a number of conversations on this. First of all, under no circumstances, if the United States to agree to allow the Saudis to enrich the uranium, that they will have a free hand to go and enrich uranium any way they want. So the United States is just going to be very much part and parcel of that process, monitoring it 24 hours a day. So that is a given. But the Saudis understand that, and the Saudis agree. You might ask the question then, why do I insist to have it enriched on their own soil when in fact they can import what they need from the outside? And that is more of a matter of more like a prestige in a way. You might say, well, Iran, from them, they are looking at Iran. Iran enriches its own uranium. So from them, this is being who they are, being what they are, the place they're occupying the Arab world, that they feel this is important to them. But they don't mind if it's totally and completely monitored by the United States. And they also agreed to join the IEA in order to allow also international monitors to see exactly what they're doing day in and day out. The Saudis, I want to tell you, are not interested in having a nuclear weapon. It doesn't serve their purpose at all. Who are they going to use it against? Iran or Israel?
Going to use a nuclear weapon against?
So as a nuclear weapon has not been used, it's a deterrent. Look at what happened between India and Pakistan. They fought 3 wars before they acquired nuclear weapons. When they acquired nuclear weapon, there was no war happened between the 2 countries. Why? They're both deterring each other because both have a nuclear weapons. The same thing worked with the United States and Russia for 70 plus years. Deterrence, a mutual deterrence, mutual assured destruction prevents people from countries from going to war. Look at what's happening in the Ukraine with all the massive losses that Putin is sustaining. He talks a little bit about using tactical nuclear weapons, but he was warned quietly by the United States, don't even think it, because that will bring a catastrophe on Russia. So Saudis understand that, Iran understand that. Nuclear weapon is not for use, it's for the deterrence. And if Iran wants to acquire it, it's because they want to deter Israel, not because they want to destroy Israel with a nuclear weapon. You know why? Because Israel can level all of Iran with its own arsenals, which are rotating in the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea with the Israeli submarine, and they know it. And they know it. So there is so all of this talk about Saudis will acquire a nuclear weapon, all of this is not the way they want to. They want to have the prestige of developing, because they also know there is a limit. There are limits how much more oil they can export and for how much longer. So they're looking for substitute energy, using nuclear power to produce energy for medical, for all kinds of purposes. So I think, again, I want to emphasize the importance of one point. The United States, if we were to agree on enrichment of uranium on Saudi soil, it's going to be monitored by the United States and the IEA.
My understanding is that the Saudis not only want to enrich uranium, but want a reactor, which leads the way to plutonium also. So that will also be monitored, you think?
Absolutely. I mean, they're not going to acquire that. Absolutely. I mean, again, in conversation we've had in the last several months on this issue, it is abundantly clear. And the Saudis understand that very, very well. There is not one chance in a million they will be able to enrich uranium without American day in, day out, minute by minute supervision. But even then, the Biden administration has not yet conceded to that, even with that provision.
Hey, Gideon, you had your hand up a second ago, Gideon.
I had, but I want to give chance to people that did not ask first.
Okay,
so yeah.
So Victor, Ellie, Asim, Eric, Gideon, it's your floor.
Okay, so Alon, one of the things I noticed even before that there is a lot of resistance on the left to the Abraham Accord and the Palestine to even now to any agreement with Saudi Arabia. There is a lot of hypocrisy that all of a sudden, they all of a sudden remember that, hey, Saudi Arabia is a kingdom and not democracy, because the same people will be very excited if Israel talk to Iran, which I think is almost as repressive as Saudi Arabia. So how do you explain this resistance on the left? Even on this call, you heard Yossi and David that basically don't believe that we should have any agreement with them. So what are your thoughts on this?
Honestly, I think their position is hollow, to say the least. I'd like for any of them to explain to me in which way a normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia is going to undermine Israel. In which way? Only if the price is to make peace with the Palestinian, to me, this is not a price to be paid. This is a price to be gained, not to be paid. And for anyone to talk about democracy, look what Netanyahu is trying to do to Israel democracy. If he has his ways and this government has its way, Israel is not going to be democracy for much longer.
Yes.
Especially if they succeed further reforming, so to speak, the judiciary and make sure that appointment of judges, including Supreme Court judges, to be at the whims of elected officials. Yeah. That Israel faces today a potential disaster if this is going to happen. And for those people to talk about, we don't want to talk to countries that are not democratic, they're fooling themselves. They're fooling themselves. Is Russia democracy? And do we have good relations with Netanyahu is buddy-buddy with Putin? Because Russia allows Israel to attack Iranian facilities in Syria. So we are very, very close with Putin. All of a sudden, Putin is a Democrat. And look, and we want to have excellent relations. Netanyahu invited himself to go to China. Since when China is a democracy, for God's sake? I mean, the hypocrisy is beyond belief. Look at, so they talk from both sides of their mouth. They don't know what they're talking about, because all they base their argument is on they read superficially in the newspaper, listening some gossip here and there. But you have to go deep down and understand what's really happening on the ground. Go to these people, see what they've in their places, talk to them face to face, with no cameras around, and they will tell you the truth, and they will tell you what the reality is all about. Nothing, in my view, today can save the day as far as Israel is concerned, is this normalization of relations, which hopefully, if it happened, it must bring an end to the Israeli occupation. Otherwise, it's not worth it.
Okay, Eric and Yossi's hands are both up. Yossi's was first, but Eric hasn't asked yet, so I'm going to give the floor to Eric first.
Okay, well, this isn't, a deep, thoroughgoing question. Maybe I'm not even phrasing this right, but I think the characterization of David Marcus's comment, whom, by the way, I don't even know, so I'm just going by what I heard half an hour ago, was not quite fair. It was characterized as how does this help? How does his perspective help Israel? And I don't think that was the point of his remark. I think the point of his remark was, as I heard it, was more, if the Saudis and Israel come to an entente and more further cooperation, even if it might benefit the Palestinians, does this not further the neoliberal, if I can use the word, I don't think David did, but the neoliberal hegemony of the world, such as the U.S. is promoting with NATO now? I'm not defending Russia, but but the U.S. is using the Ukraine war to further expand its sense of hegemony in the world. So the so-called BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, there's a kind of an anti-imperialist sentiment in among many people in the world, and I share that to a great extent, to see a shift of power away from the global north, if you will, to the global south. So I heard that more as an anti-imperialist thing than an anti-Israel thing.
As a comment, I suppose, not a question.
Yeah, I did not say it was anti-Israel at all. I'm just saying anti-imperialist on the back of Israel and Palestinian is very bad in my opinion. That's what I meant. Sorry.
Okay, Yossi?
Okay, I just want to clarify something, because I'm not against negotiation with Saudi Arabia just for negotiations. I'm against the nature of negotiations that will throw the Palestinians under the bus, like what Bahrain and United Arab Emirates did. When the Saudi Arabia came with the peace plan in 2002, and then extended it later and added and modified it, I was arguing very strong to accept this because it was a comprehensive peace that included the Arab world and the Palestinians. And therefore, I was in favor of this. And if Saudi Arabia will be the key country to negotiate this, I'll be very strong in favor of this. The only my concern is, as I said before, that it's possible that Saudi Arabia will go in the same direction of Bahrain and United Arab Emirates and will throw the Palestinians under the bus. This is the only my concern. I hope I'm mistaken, but I had a feeling that it might go in this direction. US government is not pushing Israel to make any reasonable concessions. What is the reasonable? The minimum is the Palestinian state. Netanyahu, with this manipulation, and tell Saudi, okay, you know what? I'll freeze the settlements for 6 months and stop demolishing Palestinian homes for 6 months and not arresting anybody for 6 months. Is this okay with you? They might say, okay. And then 2 months later, Netanyahu said, sorry, I have some modification because he's the biggest liar in the Middle East, Netanyahu. So I don't know what is the concessions which they asked the Israeli government to do. In the past, US asked Israel to freeze settlements for a few months, big deal. And you know what they did? They found all different way to bring settlers without freeze and manipulate, and United States basically was silent on this. So for me, a negotiation with Saudi Arabia will be good if it's include the end mean of these negotiations will be what they have in the peace plan of 2002, that they will end all the occupations and normalize, and the Arab world will normalize relationship with Israel. I'm willing to live with this because this will bring, like Alon said, a final stability to the Middle East. And I agree. I heard something today on Israeli TV. There was another settler woman was killed by a Palestinian. And I saw a discussion in Israeli TV because they feel now more and more helpless. They said, we are running after this with this. And 2 days ago was a killing and then another killing. They feel like they don't have any control over this. So what was the nature of the debate on Israeli TV? Look like that our future is that we're going to live by the sword forever. This was the nature of the discussion of different people, not only from the right, even from the center, because there is no Palestinian partner. There is no way we agree for a Palestinian state. Therefore, we have no other choice but to live on our sword and try to do the best of it. To live
Well,
with our sword.
You know,
So this is my reaction, that I'm not against.
No. I think your observation is absolutely to the point and correct.
Yeah.
That is, if the Saudis were to agree to make peace without a firm resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, is a catastrophe. It's a catastrophe for the Palestinian, but it would be catastrophe for Israel just the same. This means that in one way, because your point is very well taken. Just imagine what the Iranian would do. Iran would be supportive of the Palestinian cause. They're going to say, see, even your brothers, the Saudis, the Bahrainis, the UAE, and everybody abandon you. Now you see who's supporting you? We supporting you. We, Iran. This is something that's the only hope I have. And again, in conversation I had with some of them very recently, and they said to me, they mentioned this very thing. We cannot afford to give the Iranian the card that they're looking for by abandoning the Palestinian. We hate the MBS doesn't like the Palestinian. He hates them with passion. But the problem here is not because they are looking for their own interests, the Saudis, not the Palestinian interest, not the Israeli interest, their own interest. Their own interests dictate that they don't abandon the Palestinian. But should they make that stupid mistake, if they make that mistake, Israel is not going to be the beneficiary. That's going to be disaster for Israel, because if there is today 1 or 2 Israeli are killed here and there, you can count on it, and you mark my word, they will be in the thousands. It's only a question of when, rather if. The occupation is not sustainable for another 50 years. It's one up. You just have to go and live a day or two in Jenin and in Ramallah and even where there are no Israelis, and listen to the people, and you will weep and cry about what you hear, the stories that's been happening. I mean, the night raids, the killing, the demolition of houses, the uprooting of trees. I mean, it is heart-wrenching in every which way you can possibly imagine. We Jews are supposed to be the kind of people who would do something of this sort. To me, this is the most abhorrent thing I
you know, even if take the movement for democracy in Israel, their leadership are so afraid to deal with it. They're all the time claiming we should not talk about the occupation. It's not the right time.
Yeah. Just like here, where there's a mass shooting, people say we have to pass some decent gun control laws. And what you hear the Republicans say, well, this is not the time to talk about that. We do it later. We're sending condolences and prayers to the victims of the families of the victims. And I tell the Israelis, you know what? You're not going to have enough prayers and condolences to send, because you're going to be the victim in the future, not only the Palestinians.
Yes, there is no, they can all die together or live together.
That's exactly right.
Can I ask you another question in relate to United States?
I'm open.
You see that the U.S. government is dragging the feet behind the international community. I mean, the international community, long time ago, accepted the concept of a Palestinian state alongside Israel. The American politicians repeat all the time they support 2 states, but they don't do anything about this. What is your take on this? Why is it so difficult in the United States? Are they really afraid of AIPAC, or is it much deeper than this? What's your take on this?
It's really not much AIPAC. You know, Israel has occupied very special place in American domestic politics, not just other than being a friendship and partnership in various in so many different fields. It's hard to count in how many fields they collaborate. But there is one other element which is really a problem, and that is the evangelical group. Unless you have here 60 million who vote, And for them, the Israel is the conduit for the Messiah, as you well know that. Both Republicans and Democrats need the evangelicals to vote in any kind of election. And for the evangelical, you cannot pressure Israel to do anything. But for them, this is a non-starter. This is one of the main reasons. So even Biden today, of course, he supports two-state solution, but you're right. What is he doing about it? Other than I can tell you something is happening in recent days. In recent days, when Dermer was in Washington to talk about this whole process of normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia and all of that, he was told by the administration here, we are not going to be able to do anything of this magnitude unless there is permanent, significant concession with the Palestinians. They were told now. So that's why it is not a given at this point there's going to be any kind of an agreement between the three parties. Because the United States, as a matter of fact, now the Biden administration is saying this is not going to happen because, yes, that may help Biden with evangelicals, but it's going to destroy the entire, credibility of the United States when it comes to two-state solution. So they don't want to have that happen.
Ellie?
Eli, you are mute.
Apologies. Thank you, Alon, for the talk. My question is, what stops Saudi Arabia from sort of just kind of hedging its bet, waiting a little while? It can get most of its, concessions from China, as you've stated before, and just, let Israel and America deal with Iran and contain Iran in the region. Given that, how much does Saudi Arabia really care about being the leader of the Sunni Muslim world?
Oh, they care a great deal. They care a great deal. This is a position they covered, they want, they have had, and just imagine several millions of people do the Hajj to Mecca every single year. This is the most prestigious thing you can possibly imagine, going to Saudi Arabia, the leader of the Sunni. That's a very big thing for them, very big thing. And the reason they want to stick to the United States are multiple. Yes, they can get a reactor from China, but they just remember this: their entire weapon system, 95% of it, came from the United States. So it is inconceivable for them to have any kind of a security pact with any other country but the United States. Moreover, the United States is the United States of America, is not China, it's not Russia. There's a system here, there's a functioning democracy, there's accountability. America have held its treaties and lived up to its commitment by and large throughout since World War II. In connection with Europe, with any other country that made any kind of a treaty and agreement, they have lived up to that. So the United States enjoys credibility in this regard. And moreover, going back now several decades of full collaboration on security, on everything else you can imagine between the United States and Saudi Arabia. Sure, there was some rough points here and there because of the export, because of pricing of the oil, because of this, because of that. But the essence of the relationship is extremely solid. And for the Saudis to think of changing venue is not that simple. And it will not happen. So they want the United States, and they made it very clear to the administration. We're not going to be shopping around. You can shop around for a nuclear reactor, but you cannot shop around for the military hardware that they have had from the United States, and with all the training that's come from the United States and the equipment that the United States can sell, which is in terms of quality and precision as unmatched anywhere else, including what China produces or Russia produces or anyone else for that matter. So the United States has these major advantages and the tradition of bilateral relationship with Saudi Arabia that neither side can simply unravel and just change venue. It just won't happen.
Asim, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, actually, I think exactly the way Alon thinks.
I take that as a compliment.
Okay, Dick, you got your hand up.
This is my question. In the whole U.S. foreign policy establishment, people within the Biden administration, people without it, people around Foreign Affairs magazine, other elements, are there any factions that would support, let's say, a Palestinian state, or putting more pressure on Saudi Arabia, including their support for Yemen? I mean, I know there's a lot of public opinion in the United States is changing, especially regarding Israel and the Palestinians. But what about this bigger question of Saudi Arabia?
Well, now there is, I think I mentioned earlier, there is a ceasefire, and the United States is definitely pressuring, putting quite a bit of pressure, end the conflict in Yemen. And they feel that the resumption of diplomatic relation between Iran, and remember that Iran is supportive of the Houthis, and the Saudis are supportive of the internationally recognized government. So now that they have resumed diplomatic relationship, one of the things on their agenda is to end the war. And so then the question is, what kind of mechanism you're going to be able to employ in order to do so? The other important thing to keep in mind, the United States has been talking quietly, but very effectively, and the results seem to be very good with Iran about agreeing on some kind of control over its enrichment of uranium. Also, they're talking about Yemen. These conversations are going between the United States and Iran as we speak. And so it's the interest of Iran as well as the interest of Saudi Arabia to bring an end to the war in Yemen. I believe that we may very well see that happening in the next few months. It's entirely possible.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
So if nobody got question, I have one more question, Jeff.
Well, I actually do.
Oh, okay.
You know, Alon, when I listen to you, I think of Tom Friedman. About 7 years ago, Friedman goes to Saudi Arabia, and he comes back and says this MBS is a new man. He's changing things there. And it was hard to believe, but that's what he said. Then he went again last year, and he comes back and said, the place is completely different. So he was sort of a visionary. He saw little inklings that there would be change in Saudi Arabia, and well before it was happening, and he saw it. He says it did, and so I listen to you, and I sort of hear the same thing. I like Yossi. I look at the Israeli politics. I say there's no way that they can that the politics in Israel is such that they can make a decent offer to Saudi Arabia for the Palestinians. There's no way, not even Yossi says it's got to be a Palestinian state, but even shy of that. You talked about Gantz's party earlier, and Gantz's party is half SAR, and it's really pretty right wing. And Lapid, he might have said that he's ready to talk to the Palestinians, but he certainly hasn't acted that way in his statements. But yet you're saying
he couldn't.
So I'm hoping that you're a visionary, just like Tom Friedman was. How do you react?
Well, you know, honestly, it's not a question of being visionary. As far as I'm concerned, that's why I wish, hope that all of you be able to read my proposal, not because I wrote it, but because I looked at, and if I may take 3-4 minutes to establish the premise of that. I looked at the ground, at the Israeli-Palestinian situation. Demographically, they are intermingled in Israel, in the West Bank. And in Jordan, half the population of Jordan is Palestinian origin. That's a fact that you cannot change. There are Jews in the West Bank, there are Palestinians in the West Bank, there are Palestinians in Israel, there are Palestinians in Jordan. This is a fact that you can no longer separate. Simply drawing line and moving hundreds of thousands of people from one area to another, it just won't happen. That's a fact. The second fact is that Jerusalem exists. There is the mosque, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, there's the Dome of the Rock. This is going back more than 1,000 years. They are right. There is no one is questioning, including the Israelis themselves, and they can do nothing about it. Jordan is the custodian of the Muslim Holy Shrine. So they have, all three parties have a unique interest in Jerusalem the way it is today. That's a fact. The third fact, the settlement. No one can convince me today that Israel is going to withdraw all of the settlement. Is that going to happen? Some settlements may be relocated here and there to maintain some land contiguity for the Palestinians to establish the state of their own, but the settlement are going to be staying there. Refugees, under no circumstances will there be able refugee to go back. Where are they going to go back to? This has been agreed upon in various negotiations. I was present, and the Palestinians understand there is no right of return per se. They keep singing the song and that because they have nothing else to hold on to. There will be some 20, 30,000 may go back to Israel for under family reunification, but they understand the solution is resettlement and or compensation. That's why they understand that. So these, when you look at, and then when you speak to the Israeli about the Palestinian independence, they will tell you only perhaps in conjunction with Jordan. When I spoke to the Jordanian top official, they are absolutely open to the idea because they know from a security perspective, all three, to even today, they collaborate. They don't have a choice. There's a tremendous collaboration on security between Israel and Jordan, and even the Palestinian Authority collaborate with Israel today on all security matters. So in the future, no matter what you do, the three must collaborate on all security, which means demographically speaking, for refugees, the settlement, security, Jerusalem, all of that, all three parties are very much connected, interconnected. And as a result of this, to find a solution, you're going to be able now, to create a confederation between the three parties, Israel will be able to maintain much of the settlement there. But I don't want to go into the legalities of it because all in the proposal I made. It's a very long, it's 80-page proposal. So, but it is there, and I honestly believe it offers a practical solution in stages, provided there is what I call a process of reconciliation. Given the fact the Palestinians and the Israelis hate each other with so much passion, there is so much distrust, there is so much condemnation on both sides, you're going to need a process of reconciliation for a number of years, people to people and government to government. That is one of the prerequisites. Again, it's a very comprehensive approach. I hope you'll have a chance to look at it, and you'll see why I feel I'm not visionary per se. I'm looking at the ground, and I see what's possible. And I think there is a definitive possibility there.
Yeah, and in the email with the links, there's there'll be a link not only to that report, but to a shorter version that you wrote in your newsletter, The Establishment of an Israel-Palestine-Jordan Confederation, Why Now and How, which you wrote, which was published about 1.5 years ago.
Yeah, subsequently, the journal published one edition, all of it, about the proposal. I invited 9 scholars, Palestinian, Jordanian, Israelis, and American, to write commentary on the proposal, and World Policy Journal published a whole edition last December with the 9 constructive criticism, along with my additional essay added. So that is also available to be read, and this was special issue of December of 2022.
do you see any chance that Iran will join this, group hug if Israel in Saudi Arabia will agree?
I rule nothing out. No reason, if you look at Iran history, the Persian and the Jews were always very, very together, very much together. As a matter of fact, you can go all the way to Cyrus the Great, who actually provided money for the Jews to go back to Palestine and build the second temple. The Jews have lived in Persia for the last 2,000-3,000 years unimpeded. Nobody bothered them. A relationship between Israel and Iran until 1979 was excellent relationship. As a matter of fact, Iran recognized Israel. So what you have now is an aberration, a period of since 1979 to this day. Is the Iranian regime is going to last? Well, all I can tell you, go to the people, go to Tehran and mingle with the people and hear what they have to say. And they will tell you, I honestly do not believe that this regime is going to last. Maybe 10 more years, maybe 15 more years. It has not been able to strike a foundation within the population itself. The 95% of the people are not happy against this regime completely. So it hasn't been able to strike that kind of foundation so that there will be a populist movement that support that kind of regime. It does not exist. And if you don't have that popular foundation, the regime cannot sustain itself. And it's just one.
So it means there is a chance for something good happening.
At one point, absolutely. I hope before I go to my next destination.
Iran said few times that they will accept any agreement that the Palestinians will sign on this.
Yeah, that is true.
Yes,
they did say
they have said that. They've said that. They've said that. And that is why when Netanyahu talk about the imminent threat from Iran, I keep saying to the Israelis, if you just manage to end the Israeli occupation, the Iranis then will have no reason, no cause to keep threatening you, because this is for Iranis. You see, Iran needs an enemy to survive as a regime. So what happened if you were to have end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? They can take a credit for it. They can say, you see, we resisted. Now the Israelis doing it, and they will recognize any kind of deal that Israel makes with the Palestinians. So that's why for the Israelis to keep blaming Iran is the biggest threat, the biggest threat, when in fact they can solve that problem by ending the Israeli occupation.
Yeah.
With that, I think we'll call it quits. Let me just say that you brought up Cyrus, and when Truman accepted Israel right after Ben-Gurion's speech in 1947, someone asked him about it, and he said, "I am Cyrus, I am Cyrus." And that's reported in Jim Jordan's book.
Right.
So I thank you, Alon. We all thank you. We learned a lot from this. I will contact you tomorrow about the honorarium. And
no problem. You don't have to worry about that.
No, I do.
You really don't.
Thank you very much, Alon.
Very much.
Amazing.
Thank you, Alon.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you. I hope you have a chance. My son lives in Los Angeles.
Oh,
one of these days gonna have to go and visit, and I will be in touch.
Well, if you come here, you have to come to our demonstration, the democracy demonstration, and give a speech. That would be amazing. We are demonstrating every Sunday.
Tell me, every Sunday there's a demonstration?
Yes.
Sunday, 11 a.m. in front of the Israeli consulate.
Every Sunday.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Am I invited to speak?
Yes. If you come, that would be amazing.
Time, we can arrange this.
No. You are invited. I'm part of the organizing group.
All
you
right.
are invited.
And I tell you what, I'm going next week to London, and 2 weeks later I'm going to Israel. And if it continues in October, I'll be there.
Yes, that would be amazing. Okay.
If it's in October still available, I will be there. I promise you.
That will be amazing. Yes. Thank you.
It will be my pleasure. It will be amazing. I would love that.
Yes. Very good. Thank you.
Okay. Okay,
Okay,
I will
good, good.
give
Thank you,
you,
Jeff. Thank you, Jeff.
yeah, I will give you Gideon's email address because I'm going to be gone for 6 weeks. And
Yeah.
if you want to contact that, you can contact Gideon.
Yeah, and
Okay,
Yossi
thank you all
also.
very
Yes,
much.
thank you. Thank you
All right.
very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. I look forward to really meeting you in person. It will be a
Thank-
great pleasure for me.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Bye now.